We are so excited for you to join our love-driven video series. Be prepared to be impacted and transformed so that you can impact others.
Hi, my name is Chad Reyes. I'm the co-founder and chief visionary over at Lions Pride Leadership, and we're excited to have you for this month's love-driven video series. Today we're going to be having a conversation around leading from your strength. And you know, what's interesting is we live in a world that tries to get us to be good at everything. But we're going to be talking about leading from your strength, because in your strength is where all the opportunities, everything you want in life comes from your strength. So John, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because leadership is really finding where people's strengths are and then keeping them there.
Right.
You want to share a little bit about that?
Okay. Leading from your strength is so important. It's because it's where the person is most fulfilled. It is the most effortless part of what they do. And even in growing, if you're growing in your strength, the motivation is always there. Yeah. So whether you're growing or just operating in your responsibilities during the course of a day, if you remain in your strengths, the motivation's there, the competency's there, and there's a level of confidence that comes from moving in your strengths. So that's why leading from your strengths, it makes all the difference in the world.
Now, why do you think people don't? I mean, I'm with you. I think leading from your strengths is where it's more enjoyable,
right.
It's fun, people recognize that you're good at it. But why do you think in our culture and our society, people feel like they got to be good at everything?
Yeah.
Because I believe people are just deceived in that area. But why do you think that they believe they have to be good at everything? Because I feel like it's almost taught in the school system.
Right.
Like, you know, like even when like you're graded in school, you got to get A's and everything. And I understand the reason for that.
Right.
But that reason then it leads into every area of life, and we think we got to be good at everything.
Right. Sometimes it just comes from the superhero mentality. You know, you have the superhero that could do anything.
Yeah.
Just flawless and everything. And we try to emulate that. And without even realizing it, that it doesn't play well in the real world, especially in the business world. And understanding the fact that you are strong at something. Everyone is wired in a certain way where they have gifts and talents that far outweigh the others that they have. And we're wired that way so that what you do, to your point, becomes more enjoyable. And I think it was Mark Twain might have said it as well. There's several who actually said it, that if you follow your gifts and talents, and we're talking about your strengths, and you make a career from that, then you'll never work another day in your life.
Yeah. It's funny, you know, people say to Danielle and I all the time, they say, you know, you guys work a lot. And I even remember friends of ours saying that, right? And I say to them, it's only work if you'd rather be somewhere else.
That's right.
Right? And I think back when I was young, and I played, you know this, but I played a lot of basketball.
Right.
And I would play 12, 14, 15, 16 hours. I remember in the summers, I'd wake up at 7 a.m. and I would be out on the court till midnight. You know, in between, obviously you have some food to throw some stuff in your system. But I didn't consider that work. Right. And I think even like today, when people say, well, you do a lot of hours. And I think about it, I'm like, I'm not working.
Right.
All I'm doing is playing a game that I love. And as I get better at it, why would I want to play less of it?
Right.
I want to play more.
You play more.
Right? So how do we find what we love? How do we find our strength? And how do we stay in that space where we're doing what we love, we're leading out of our strength, and others are being positively impacted by it?
Right. That would come with the realization of, you know, what your strength is, and I'll explain that. Where to first of all find your strength. To do that, it's just a matter of looking over your life. What comes most natural to you? And like we live in a society where unfortunately we flip that. I guess in school that happens. Like I was pressured growing up, you know, you got to find a career and you got this and that. And as a child, you're functioning in your strengths anyway because you do what comes naturally.
Yeah.
You enjoy doing that. You follow your passion, and your passion is always going to be tied to what you're good at. That's just the way they're wired. So children do that automatically.
To your point, I see that in my nieces and nephews, right? I see that in my nephew Carmine, right? He is so gifted in the area of sales and getting people to take action, right?
Right.
And I see it, and the kid is masterful at it, right? But for some people in our family, it's like, why is he doing that? Please stop. And I get it, and I understand it.
Right.
But really, if you think about it, that's his gift.
That's right.
I really believe that this kid's going to be a wildly successful entrepreneur because of that gift. You know, he's persistent, and he loves to sell.
Yeah.
He's selling in everything. He's selling me when he wants to sleep over. He's selling me when he wants to go out to eat. He's selling me all day long. And I embrace it, though, because I think that's really his gift.
Right.
I think he's really good at it. Now, some children just do it because they just want their way. I actually think that this is one of his strengths. So could you speak to how important it is also when we have children? So part of this is a business context, but part of this is our personal life. We look at our children, we look at our nieces, our nephews, right? How important is it to encourage the gifting at such a young age so that people can operate out of their strength as they continue to grow and develop?
Okay. The first one for starters, by steering them to their strengths when they're young, you eliminate the confusion that comes when they get older. And as they get older, you know, usually you're in high school already, and they're already all right, I want to go to college. What do I want to do? What's going to be my major? I still don't know what I want to do. And it's not encouraged from childhood. And psychologists even said it. If you go to a playground and just sit there and watch, and if you're observant of watching the children play, based on how they play, you can get a good idea of who they are. You can tell who the leaders are. You can tell who would be more administrative, you know, who would be more relational. And you just look at that, and there are whole areas, career tracks in each strength. So starting when they're young to recognize what they're doing and begin to encourage them. Like you question them. Do you like doing that? Do you like doing this? And they'll be honest with you,
Brutally.
Without a doubt.
Brutally
they won't want to do anything else, you know? And begin to steer them in that direction. There's an old proverb that says that if you train up a child the way they should go, when they are older, they will not depart from it.
Yeah.
Why? Because they become accustomed to doing something that they're very passionate about. It comes easy to them because they're wired that way. It's in their DNA. And if you train them from adolescence to be doing this, and as they get into high school, that's going to be their focus, because growing up from the playground, you know, just in different building blocks, whatever they're doing, they've been accustomed to following their heart, which usually leads them into the things they're good at. And they're always going to be passionate. So it's going to be easier to steer them to their career path, because now a parent could say, you know, you're very good at this. You've been this way in grade school and so on. Well, look, these are your options, and you can lay out several options that function on those strengths.
You know, thinking of, as we're talking, I'm thinking of one of our other companies, right? Wealth and Legacy Group. And things that we've been talking about and sharing with these successful entrepreneurs and these families for years. And there are studies that show that the oldest family businesses in the world, for those that are listening, there are some family businesses that have been around for 1,000 years. Which is crazy. I mean, it's hard to realize that in our society, right? Because we're in a country that has a 250 plus year history. But what about in countries that have thousands of year history? But when you look at families that have been around and they're operating still as a family business, 25, 30 generations later, you're talking about some of these families that have been around over 1,000 years, right? There are so many businesses, I mean, not tremendously thousands of them, but there are a good amount of businesses that have been around for 1,000 years. And one of the things, John, that it's interesting, and I think our listeners are going to want to hear, is when you take an analysis of all of those businesses, and one of the key attributes that allowed them to have longevity and success, it's back to what you were just sharing. they identified the child's talent at a young age.
Right.
And then they encouraged them from a very young child. So as an example, they saw this child at 3, 4, 5 years old, naturally how they played on the playground as an example. And then they encouraged them, if they saw that they were really good at numbers, they encouraged them to maybe get into the accounting space.
Exactly.
And another thing that they did, which is really pretty cool, is they didn't allow that person to come into the business without going somewhere else first. So they had to go somewhere else.
Right.
And for at least 2 to 5 years, and then come back to the business, right? And then the last is this. They came into the business only in the strength.
That's right.
They did not allow them to come in as a weakness. So they were, these families that have been around for 1,000+ years as a family business, they would not allow a family member to come in a weakness.
Right.
They only allowed family members to come in their area of strength.
Yes.
And then that tells the success, because the studies show that family businesses don't make it. 90% of them don't make it to the 3rd generation. 97% of them don't make it to the 4th generation. So what percentage is that to make it to the 30th generation?
Yes.
It has to be 0.00000001.
Right.
But obviously they're doing something right, and that's what it is. Finding the child's strength, developing their strength, and keeping them in their strength throughout their lifetime. Yep. And that kind of brings me to my last point before we wrap up this conversation. The last point is this: the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah, God, I like this.
Can you share on the 10,000 hour rule? How important it is to perform in the strength for that period of time? Maybe I think our listeners will find a tremendous value in that.
Putting it in a different way, because you talk about intergenerational. So let's put it in generations. The first generation, actually, they're the ones who sow the seed. They lay the foundation. The second generation, that now you're talking parental. So, it's mom and dad's company and so on, and you go into it. But now, to your point, if you succeed by the 3rd generation, by the time the 3rd generation is in charge and that 4th generation is coming up, you're looking at 3 lifetimes, and now you've already established a culture.
Yeah.
So when that little one in the 4th generation starts they're growing up in a culture that's what you're born for, that's what you're bred for, and soon after they learn how to speak, they already have a sense, that's what I want to do. Why? Because that's all their families do. It's all their families. It's their history. It's in their DNA. So now it's a culture. And so many of the companies now, and to your point, they make it to the 2nd generation. Really good companies do. But not establishing a culture where just expecting that, our children, they're going to go into this. Well, you can't expect that, because the ones that make it 4, 5, 6, 7 generations, they are training the child from the time they're able to speak. And just even when they're playing, they're already grooming them, train up a child in the way they should go. And hour after hour, year after year, month after year, and then generation after generation, it becomes the way of life, and now it's the family's identity. And like years ago, you'd have the crest, and you'd have the
family
shield.
crest.
And that meant, you look at it, that's the story of your family. Well, that's still with us today, but so few understand it because we're so transient in our travel and thinking.
That's what it's called.
Yeah, exactly. So to your point with this, putting in the time where now this is how I raise my children. Like you go back years ago with the Vanderbilts. Well, your child is born, okay. It's like, oh, this is so-and-so, and whatever name you give them, boy or girl, to them, they're a Vanderbilt. That's instilled in them because the name Vanderbilt has built in it already what they're going to be doing. This is what we stand for. So now it's not so much a career path, it's more of the culture. Now we're going to teach you the values of a Vanderbilt. This is how a Vanderbilt carries themselves. This is how a Vanderbilt does something in society. And then also now it's time to get married or whatever. Well, these are the type of people a Vanderbilt would marry. It's a whole mindset, it's a culture, it's a whole world within a world. And it's the only way you can survive 4, 5, and 6 generations.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that when we go back and we look at the difference between like a Vanderbilt family and the Rockefeller family and all of that, they've been able to, depending on the family,
Yes.
have been able to build something very special. Like the Rockefellers have been perpetuating it for so many more years than the Vanderbilts have. But what's interesting, coming back to the 10,000 hour rule, is if we're going to operate out of our strength,
Right.
if we got to put the 10,000 hours in anyways, when would we rather put the 10,000 hours in? When we're 60 and then we put 5 years or 6 years or 7 years of that in? Or when we're 7 and we start gaining that time of the 10,000 hours? Because the studies show that those who perform in their strength for 10,000 hours basically become a master or mastery in that strength. So the goal really should be to get to the 10,000 hours in our strength as quickly as possible.
Right.
So that's what I want to encourage the listeners is, whether you're a wildly successful family business, or you're a leader just working at a company, or if you're somewhere in between, or you're just getting started, wherever you are, figure your strength and figure out how to get there as quickly as possible to the 10,000 hour rule.
Yes.
Because as soon as that happens, you're going to start gaining mastery. And hopefully that doesn't take you 40 years. Hopefully that takes you 5 years. And if you can get to there in 5 years, and you started right out of college at 23, now you're 28. Now from 28 to the rest of your life, you're operating in mastery.
Yes.
And people don't pay for mediocrity, people pay for excellence.
That's right.
And excellence only occurs in your strength.
That's right.
So thank you for this conversation. I hope that those that were listening were really impacted by this conversation. Remember this, just in wrapping, people don't pay for mediocrity. People pay for excellence, and excellence comes from your gifting. I encourage you to continue to find your gifting. It'll make room for you. It'll open up doors that you never thought was possible. Hope you're blessed by this. Have a great day until next month.